Toronto, in the context of global cities, can be considered one of the leading examples of diversity and successful integration of immigration populations according to their demographics. Toronto has 30% of their populace speaking a language other than English or French, indicating a strong presence of immigrants settling into the city. Having Drake and the recent NBA champs, the Raptors, as media representations of the city, helped to brand Toronto as a global destination. Toronto is the fifth largest city in North America. Largest cities include Mexico City, New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago, with its 6 million residents within the Greater Toronto Area. There are over 21 million tourists who take the trip up north annually, making use of the PATH transit system to get around, the second largest transit system in North America. To understand how Toronto has been able to become a diverse global city, we must look at the evolution of their immigration policies over time. Prior to the 60s, Canada did not have any real issues with immigration due to their geography up north, yet they still had strict restrictions on their immigration policy. Primarily, it was whites from Europe who were able to come prior to liberal adjustments to these policies. The precedent of race-based selection was gone by 1962 and shifted towards more skill-based policies which brought parity to the Canadian immigration system. By liberalizing immigration policy, Canada set forth the foundation for Toronto to become the diverse city it is today. What we must consider in the context of Toronto is how officials distributed responsibilities for urban planning after World War II. When the metropolitan area of Toronto was created in 1954 by the province of Ontario, they split up urban planning responsibilities in two tiers, one at the metropolitan level and one at the municipal level for townships/suburbs outside the old city of Toronto. The metropolitan level would be responsible for big infrastructure like expressways. Municipal levels covered smaller roads and streets. Though this system worked initially, the influx of immigrants after World War II with new immigration policy put a strain on the governing system. This is also where Ralph notes that the system started to fail due to too much volume from new immigrants, who were primarily based in the outside suburbs of Toronto. What fails to be noticed about Toronto and their image as a global city is the environmental discrimination that their marginalized communities face to cater to elites within urban centers. Let us look at Scarborough, a region within the Greater Toronto Area, as an example of discrimination against visible minorities regarding housing. Scarborough has a population of around 118,000 people, 21.5% of which are considered low income, while also having an immigration population of 61,000. Coincidentally, this residential area is adjacent to a commercial zoned property called the Capital Metal Industries. They produce items used in the construction industry, such as metals and fasteners. In studies looking at the area from an environmental justice perspective, it is clear that there is a certain bias expressed against areas such as Scarborough. Looking at a 2007 report on environmental justice, we see they highlight concerns of industrial land use near residential areas, as well as the quality of housing. Scarborough is one of the areas of concern, facing both inadequate housing quality and environmental hazards. This no doubt originates from zoning configurations from the municipal government and building codes from the metropolitan legislatures. Historically, as late as 1946, 90% of the manufacturing enterprises were found within the boundaries of the city. That figure fell to 77% by 1954 as businesses chose to build on former agricultural lands beyond the city limits, a trend which continues today. With the increased desire to live in cities, the recent implementation of employment areas is concerning, as they now hold 79% of the manufacturing jobs in Toronto. Though this may create jobs, it does not account for the external costs created through pollution and public health concerns within communities adjacent to employment areas. This legacy of industrial use outside the city haunts recent residents of Toronto within the suburbs, where they are burdened with environmental hazards near their homes at the desire of inner-city interests to practice being a global city. The pressure to adhere to the myth of the global city, one without industrial manufacturing within the center, has forced Toronto to discriminate against its suburban immigration population to achieve this image. For my project, I would like to examine the environmental disparities that certain residents of Toronto face due to their location. When we look at the failure of certain municipalities to keep industrial production away from citizens, we must ask, who is represented in the winners and losers of urban planning? Is it a coincidence that the suburbs saw a demographic shift when immigrants became more ethnically diverse? What were the motives of the metropolitan government when they were making the zoning choices which privileged the urban center over its townships? Given that the City Council of Toronto has declared a climate emergency on October 8th with a pledge to make climate action a priority, there must be policy precautions for the city to take. If Toronto is able to address both environmental discrimination in their community and reduce emissions, the city can become a Western model for a sustainable global city.